It's not every day that I get to introduce a Vietnamese American Nobel Peace Prize nominee. Today, I'm thrilled to have Amanda Nguyen, the CEO and founder of RISE, a national nonprofit working to protect civil rights of sexual assault survivors. Amanda was the power behind the Sexual Assault Survivors' Rights Act, the 21st bill in modern US history to pass unanimously through Congress. The law overhauls the way that rape kits are processed within the United States and creates a Bill of Rights for victims. Through the law, survivors of sexual assault are given the right to have a rape kit preserved for the length of the case's statute of limitations, to be notified of an evidence kit's destruction, and to be informed about results of forensic exams. She's a change maker and a trailblazer who is now helping everyday people pass their first laws. Please welcome Amanda to Talks today.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me.
Amanda, thanks so much for being with us today. I know that in the past pre-COVID days, you were on the speaker circuit quite a bit. How has this year been for you?
Wow, I mean, it's 2020, so surviving and trying to thrive.
That's what we like to hear. One of the things that I enjoy most about your story is that you don't feel the need to shrink and constrain yourself into a few boxes. In an interview with The Cut in 2019, you said, if Elon Musk can do Tesla, SpaceX, and PayPal, then I can run my company and still love fashion, art, and space. You can easily geek out over space as much as you can about, the power of fashion. So how do you keep such an expansive mindset full of opportunities in a world where we're sometimes pressed to live narratives that fit neatly into functions and roles?
We are all multitudes. And quite honestly, it is so tough to match the expectations of everyone. It's impossible, and so I realized, okay, I just have to be authentic and people can take it or leave it. So I'm glad that people have gravitated towards that.
That's amazing. So, I know you're interested a lot in space. If you weren't doing the work that you're doing today, what would your aspirations be?
Oh, well, definitely a mission specialist in the astronaut corps. That is my dream, and it still is my dream. So hopefully, actually, in the next coming months, I'll have some exciting news about that.
Oh, that's wonderful. Life is a marathon. Never know where it's going to go. Well, growing up in a Vietnamese American home in Southern California, were there any hints or inklings in early life that you might carve your own path as a CEO and civil rights activist one day?
Probably the amount of times I talk back to my parents, which is not a very attractive quality, if I can euphemistically put that, for Vietnamese daughters. But I do want to say that, as a first generation, or rather the child of refugees who came here to America, yes, my parents and my family came from, a certain set of values, but also they ultimately wanted what would make me happy. And that wasn't exactly what they had thought of for me, and it's something that I want to stress to a lot of Asian Americans, especially Asian American women who are deciding, oh, do I choose a path that my parents want me to because I want to be in Vietnamese Hue Pao? Do I want to be, the good daughter, the good son, or do I forge what I want, what makes me happy? And let me tell you that when I decided to be an activist, that was an interesting choice. But ultimately, they came around. So just be you.
That's amazing. And I think you speak to something very true for a lot of the experiences of, children of immigrants, children of refugees, is there are a lot of sacrifices that were made so that you have the optionality of choice. And that optionality is a very beautiful thing that maybe previous generations weren't always afforded. How did that conversation go when you decided, you were Harvard educated, you worked in the White House for some time, NASA for some time, how did that conversation start when you said, hey, mom and dad, I want to pivot into something, and activism in a very particular field that is often not talked about in Asian American families?
Oh, LOL. Well, here's me being my authentic self. It did not go well. And I knew that it is something that I had to do for me and to survive. And whether or not they were on this ship, the ship was sailed. So, it took some time, to be very honest. And it wasn't only with my parents, it was with very well-intentioned friends, people who were like, hey, like you have these other dreams. And this is before Me Too. So when I was like, I want to tell the world that I'm a rape survivor, people were like, oh, hold up a second. There's a stigma around this. Are you sure? Are you sure that's what you want to be known for the rest of your life? The worst moments that have happened to you? But I know that these people who told me this, the majority of them came because it was what they thought would be my best interest, because they loved me. And it was very difficult. I'm not gonna lie about that. But in the end, people just want you to be happy. And I'm so glad, and so are they, that I chose to speak my truth and stand strong.
Thank you for your candor. I mean, it does require a lot of courage to go against the tide sometimes. So I really want to talk about your work. I could read the laundry list of accolades and accomplishments that you've achieved at 29. But I think a lot of our listeners today would love to hear about your genesis story and how Rise was born. And I think discussing sexual assault is often a nuanced and sometimes uncomfortable conversation that many don't know how to start talking about or to respond to. How did you come to the decision that this was the purposeful work that you wanted to pursue? And what were the obstacles, challenges along the way?
I want to harken back to your first question, which is about being multitude. So I'm a super nerd. My passion is actually in astrophysics, but specifically exoplanets, which are extrasolar planets, planets outside of our solar system. So completely divorced from my day-to-day, which is activism and writing laws and passing them. But there's this trope, especially for survivors of trauma, especially for sexual violence trauma survivors, where people tend to, if they've publicly spoken about it, limit them to the moment of their trauma. It's kind of this vicarious voyeurism where you are placing this victim / survivor on a glass pedestal in a glass box, asking them to relive it and never giving them the space to grow. And so, I want to say, first and foremost, my origin story, yes, it came from a very nerdy background, because that's who I am. And I also want to give space to, again, the fact that we can be whatever it is that we want to be. And I want to make it very clear that, yes, I'm an activist, but also I really do plan to go to space. And I also love fashion, and I'm going to wear red lipstick no matter if it's in the halls of Congress or, in the lab. So with that, for me, I'd always cared about these issues, but I had no idea how broken the criminal justice system was until I actually became a rape survivor and had to walk through this Kafkaesque labyrinth myself. I remember going to the hospital to have my rape kit procedure done, and it was 6 hours long. Most people don't know that it takes 3 to 7 hours long, and that's because it's both life-saving medical attention and also a forensic exam. The body is the crime scene. And I remember walking out of the hospital and feeling so alone, fully, for the first time, understanding the definition of lonely. And the sun was rising. I was handed a taxi voucher to go back to my dorm room where I was raped. And I asked, okay, well, where do I go from here? What I learned, actually, the first place I went to was Google. I went to Google and I Googled, well, what are my rights? And what is the process? And it was so difficult to find. And what I did discover is that the system, didn't exist for survivors. That rape kits could be destroyed, untested, at 6 months, even if the statute of limitations for rape in Massachusetts is 15 years. And that the double standard is that convicted rapists have the right to hold on to the evidence for the duration of their conviction, but survivors didn't. And I also critically remember walking into my local area rape crisis center, and the waiting room was filled. And I didn't realize at the point, wow, my story's not my own. And if I'm going through everything that I'm going through and I have resources, what is everybody else going through? So that's the decision point where I said, okay, here's my choice. I can accept this injustice or rewrite the law. And one of these things is a lot better than the other. So I rewrote it. And it really, it sounds so simple now, but I do think that there are so many powerful forces that want to keep status quo that have disincentivized citizens, people in this community from forgetting their constitutional right, which is that you have the ability to petition the government. You have the ability to have a government that serves and is of the people, by the people, for the people. And so that's what we did. I sent out an email to everyone I knew and asked them to walk with me. And I asked them to help me put together a bill. And we ended up passing it unanimously to the United States Congress.
Congratulations. What a story. From the depths of what a lot of people would consider to be a very traumatic and devastating experience, you really rose. And listening to the story and your candor and vulnerability sharing it, I really thank you for sharing this with our Google offices today. One thing that I think we'd love to hear more about is, how does one rewrite the law, right? You knew the system was broken. You saw that there were others, at the Rape Crisis Center with you. This was not a singular story. How does one go about that process? And is it, you make it, I think your journey is so special because you did it in 7 months and unanimously. Today, when I look at, the TV, it's political polarization everywhere. So how does one get that done?
I'll give you two answers. One is the technical answer, and then the other is the mindset answer, and both are equally important. So the first one technically is that, yes, there are elected representatives that are the lead sponsor or sponsors of your bill. They're the technical author of your bill if you go to congress.gov, and I'll only talk about the federal context. States have different rules, which I might get to in a second, but if you go to congress.gov .us, I think there's a specific technical person. But these people are there to serve you. So they have constituent meetings, and what that means is that they have different councils, legislative aides who are assigned to your issue and are always looking for new ideas. And you can make, in fact, not only can you make a meeting request with them, you have the full right to do that and to say, hey, this is a problem that my community is facing. I am part of that community, and here's a bill. I've written it already. Please take a look at it and please consider it. It's as easy as that. And to add a little more technical layer to that, there's a very important concept in passing laws that I think not many people are familiar with, and it's called agenda setting authority. It's really important. Agenda setting authority. And what it means is the people who have the authority to set the agenda for a bill to advance. If you think back to like Schoolhouse Rock, right? Like that cartoon bill that's walking. I wish they taught this. And what agenda setting authority again means is that there is a limited way in which your bill, in which any bill can advance within Congress. And it is incumbent upon the person who has this authority to put it up for a vote. 99% of bills die this way. And so if you're doing, a power mapping of strategically, who do we need to target in order to convince someone? Well, you have to have these 4 people. And those 4 people are Speaker of the House, usually it's the Senate President, but Majority Leader in the Senate, and the chairperson of your committee. And most civil rights bills goes through Judiciary Committee, so it's the chairperson of Judiciary with House and Senate. That's a technical answer. There's a lot more that I could go to, but that's really important to get out there. The mindset answer is just that. People feel like they have limited access to democracy. You've voted, you've marched, you've protested. Now what? You can run for office. That's certainly an option, and you should do that if you want to do that. There's a reason why a lot of bills haven't been passed. There's a reason why there's this gridlock, and that's because, unfortunately, with these very partisan, hyper-partisan times, when you are part of a party and you run and you're in office, you immediately get 50% or more people who are opposing you because it's a political game. And so the reason why we've been so successful is because we took that out. Most issues aren't partisan. Most issues, if you just look at the facts, don't have to be. And if we focus it on the community, we don't make it a Republican or Democrat thing. I'm a rape survivor and I'm talking to you, a person who has promised to serve me and who has promised to serve your community, your people. Remember that. That's how we get it done.
I think it's a big call to action for many who have had ideas or who've always wanted to pass things to realize that it's maybe a lot more of an accessible journey than most of us may realize, right? When we hear of DC, we always imagine it to be this faraway place. You must be elected. You've got to know someone. It's beautiful to hear that you're making this so transparent for people to access. And actually, that Schoolhouse Rock thing that you mentioned, I'm Canadian, so I actually never watched those growing up. And maybe about a month ago, my partner just shared them with me, like I'm Just a Bill in Capitol Hill. Yeah. And I thought it was amazing that there was all these educational resources. So, RISE's mission now is focused on helping everyday people pass their very first law. I've heard that you're building, a social justice incubator. How can everyday people access that? How can people at Google, apply? Would love to learn more.
Oh my God, please apply. Okay, so here's the concept. After we passed our federal law in 2016, when President Obama signed it and it was passed by a Republican Congress, so truly bipartisan, we had over 1 million people reach out to us, either through texting, tweeting, petition signatures, and literal letters. People saying, hey, that's amazing that you've passed this, but also you look a little different from the people who are able to pass this. You are people of color, you're women, you're in your 20s, and I'm like that too. So can you help me figure out how to pen my own civil rights into existence? Since then, we've passed 32 laws, all bipartisan, nearly all unanimous. And it impacts 84 million people. And along the way, as we've done these 32 laws, we realized that there's a playbook. And a year ago, some very special people reached out to us, the survivors and the community members of Parkland shooting. They said similarly, hey, we've seen you be able to pass these laws on an issue, sexual violence, which is notorious for being partisan. You think, well, to literally anything, violence against women, Title IX, anything. And can you give us some tips? We realized, we have been running these campaigns in a way that is transferable, scalable to other issues. And so we said, you know what? Yes, absolutely. We want to help you. And that group, which calls themselves Zero USA, after being our pilot acceleration, ended up passing an extreme risk protection order. So the concept of RISE Justice Labs is an accelerator for civil rights. Think like Y Combinator for civil rights. It's a 12-week program. And what we do is by the end of it, we also have a demo day instead of, demonstration means democracy, kind of corny.
I love it.
And instead of investors, there are philanthropists. So yes, investing money, but also senators, also state legislators, artists, celebrities who are there listening to your activist idea of how you want to take a bill and turn it into law. And throughout the 12 weeks, what we're providing is seed funding so that people can work full time on their issue, is training, how everything from the very brief technical thing that I just shared to literally writing and drafting your bill with you, teaching you how to testify, teaching you how to hold press conferences, all the way to, demo day, which is introducing your bill. That's the goal here. We're trying to help you pen your idea into your law, your rights into a law. And so the way that people can apply is by going to risenow.us/apply. And please, if you have an idea, please apply. We're so thrilled to be helping you, empower you. We're not about being a voice for the voiceless. Really, our goal is to pass the mic and to give all of what we've learned to you, because I want to go to space. So please do it better than me.
It's amazing to hear that you've done this like 32 times over, and that outside of just the sexual assault survivors bill, you've also been able to move this to other survivors of other traumatic events, and that there will be tools moving forward to help anyone who has a cause that they're passionate about to take action. I want to go back to something that you were talking about. You expressed that, hey, oftentimes when people think about CEO or legislator, I'm not the face that people think of. I'm a woman of color. So what do you have to say to those who want to take the launch into pursuing their passions, but who feel like they're underqualified or need to earn this, quote unquote, right to lead?
Are you a human? You're qualified. You're qualified. Let me just tell you right now, the people who are in the hallways, they are less qualified than you, and they have ideas that may not be as great as yours, and yet they're there. So if they're there, why aren't you there? Look, imposter syndrome is very real, right? But the beauty of being in this country that affords us these rights, especially that constitutional right to petition the government, is that you are the people that they serve. I know that this country, I kind of joke about it, but it's real. I feel like there are institutional powers and forces that have gaslit us to forget our power to be, well, the people who are governed by what we deserve to be governed by. And we get the government that we deserve. We get the government that we work for. And this is an experiment. America, democracy, this is an American experiment. That pursuit of happiness, all of that is dependent on how each generation defines themselves. And you are part of that. So, if you ever feel like, hey, maybe I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. Maybe I don't have enough money. I didn't have enough money when I started. Hey, maybe I just don't look like that. Maybe I don't feel confident enough. Let me tell you, there are so many times which I didn't feel confident enough. And what I did was I thought, okay, maybe I, Amanda, an individual who don't have, the privileges that are usually afforded to people who look like me who write these laws, maybe I feel small at this moment. But you know what's not small? What I'm fighting for the millions of rape survivors, the cause. Think about the cause. That has always helped me.
I love that centering of that idea. It's so powerful. And maybe after space, you'll have a book, personal coaching. I feel like these are life lessons that so many people could benefit to hear from, because, when you don't activate or recognize your own power, it's very hard to then do anything out of it. I'd love to talk about money and funding, right? Movements need support. How did you go about with fundraising? And what are some of the most important lessons that you've learned during your process of pitching Rise and its missions to donors?
I came from a refugee background. So let me say that funding for me or asking for money was something, and is still something, that I have to proactively say, okay, I have to divorce the idea that net worth is equal to worth. And that when I'm sitting in front of a potential donor, a potential investor in my idea, that I'm actually not begging. What I'm doing is giving them an opportunity to be a part of the change that I'm creating. That's really hard to internalize, especially, speaking from personal experience, where I'm asking, these grants that are larger than anything my family has ever owned collectively. And I remember the first donor I'd ever asked was my professor, Swanee Hunt. And I knew that she gave, she ran a foundation, and, she was successful. She was my professor. So I came with a budget, and, she sat with me, and I'll never forget it. She was like, "You've told me how great your idea is, but when are you going to ask, Amanda?" I literally slank. Is that a word? I shrank in my chair. I slithered and sank in my chair. It's because I was like, oh my God, I don't want to do that. But what I've learned is for me, putting the mission, it's about the mission. It's about giving people an opportunity. If they can't give their time and they have other resources like money, then they can give that. And don't be afraid to pitch your idea. If X person, if these presidential candidates can pitch their idea, and if you believe in your idea just as much, then you can do it too. And they're asking for millions of dollars, and they have millions of dollars already. So you can do it for your idea.
I think that's so eloquently put. I too, like you, am also Vietnamese, and my parents are also refugees after the war. And one thing my mom always taught me when I was growing up was don't ask, don't get, right? But how much do you ask for is a big question when, there are different tiers of what everyone is familiar with, depending on how they were raised and what their expectations are. So I guess for our audience listeners today, I think Amanda just hit a very important fact, which is, we got to go and make those asks in order for anything to happen. I'd also love to hear more about, the type of work you do requires a lot of courage and a deeply personal investment. Hearing the stories of other survivors, touring the country to, spread your mission. How do you center yourself and find your joy, amidst all the chaos and demands of your life?
Joy to me is the most radical form of rebellion, and it is so important. It's something that I cherish. I named Rise specifically because it represents a recognition that someone is coming from a place, but moving forward, going up. And even the color orange, which is our organization's color, is meant to invoke joy. It's so critical that people take care of themselves, because activism burnout is a very real thing. And what my therapist taught me was to recognize if someone is coming towards me. I'm an empath. So, if someone comes to me and they have a cry, I absorb it. And what she encouraged me to do is ask, oh, is this my trauma or is it their trauma? And if it's their trauma, I don't need to absorb. I can still be empathetic, but I can put up a splash guard, essentially, an emotional splash guard, and recognize boundaries. It has been a learning curve, maybe trial by fire. But, I think what has helped me throughout all of this, beyond therapy, which I'd love to normalize, because, I think therapists are like consultants, but like for your personal life. So, is the fact that we need to be whole human beings, and for us to help other people, we need to help ourselves first. And also that there is so much joy to be out there, to be had. So you can do really hard work, but also have a lot of joy with it. I want to give an example. So I love fashion, and I realized sitting at New York Fashion Week that there was a very commonly asked question. One of the most commonly asked questions is, oh my God, I love your outfit. What were you wearing at that show? And I thought to myself, oh my God, I've been asked this question before in my life. After my rape, what were you wearing? And it's the same exact words, but it has the opposite effect. In Fashion Week, it's empowering, it's your choice, it's your agency, but in the other context, it's disempowering. And so what we're doing is throwing the first ever New York Fashion Week Survivor Fashion Show, where we're having survivors reclaim that phrase and put joy back into it. We're having survivors walk the runway with an ally, and then each of the pairs will be coupled, or each of the couples will be paired with a designer that will be dressing them in things that make them feel great. So that's a way, to pair joy into the very difficult work that we do.
And you've talked a lot about mindset today, and I think this is a perfect example of just how many possibilities you could see. And you're right, a lot of people could take a look at that question and have a lot of hurt behind it, and have a lot of shame and negative emotions. But by rewriting the narrative, just as you penned your own civil rights into existence, you're taking that power back for yourself. So I'm very happy to hear that these sorts of initiatives are going on. Also to hear you talk about normalizing therapy. I think a lot of us would be in agreement that, we have physical trainers for fitness sometimes. You may have a dietitian if you have some gastrointestinal issues. And so why not, have a coach to help you through the ebbs and flows of life. We are also kind of on the precipice right now of a historical election taking place amidst a pandemic, right? So many people are out of work this year, and COVID has left an indelible mark on our social fabric. We have seen moments and movements captivate the nation and people waking up in their consciousness to face injustice. How do you manage activism fatigue? And also, why did you choose legislative change as your vehicle to make a difference?
That's a great question. It's not often one I get. So when looking at the options that I had for enacting the kind of change that I wanted to enact, which is, there's raising awareness, and that is very important. The change that I wanted to create, well, it stemmed from my personal experience, right? So it was a bureaucratic oversight that happened. People often ask, okay, so why is it so bad for rape survivors? The answer is, look, most rape survivors are women. There are male and other gendered survivors as well. And the statistics show that most rape survivors are women, and the law has a gender, and that gender is not female. That is why there are these loopholes, that's very euphemistically putting it, these situations that are happening in our criminal justice system. But to go back to joy, and to go back to how it is that activism, self-care is so important, I want to go to space. So most astronauts, when they go to space for the first time, have an experience. It's called the overview effect. It's documented in psychiatric literature of seeing Earth for the first time and everything that's ever lived or died on this pale blue dot. Essentially, they have an existential crisis. And people leave Earth as technicians, but return to Earth as humanitarians, profoundly moved to do something. It's this idea that justice does not depend on geography, that we're all in this together, and that we should do something to help out our brothers and sisters across the world and in our community. That sense of perspective, orbital perspective, overview effect, has been really helpful in getting through activism fatigue, and realizing, with a bit of distance, that there's a path forward.
I'm just thinking about the anecdote of looking up, at Earth from, the planets and all the solar system. That's kind of an interesting metaphor, and I'm sure it's a moving one. And I hope you get there in the coming years. I only have a couple of questions left before we open to Q&A in the next couple of minutes. The first one is, I want to highlight that you just won the Elevate Prize, and we moved this talk back to 1 p.m. because you're going through orientation. Can you share with us what the prize celebrates and what it will be used for?
Yeah, so the Elevate Prize celebrates 10 entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, who have ideas about changing their community. We won it specifically for Rise Justice Labs. So that money is going to be repurposed into seed funding for activists, for you, if you apply. And we are so thrilled. The MIT Solve community, which partnered with the Elevate people and is running some of their programming, are so incredible, and believe in making our democracy more accessible. Part of what we found as we have been going through the bowels of every state house to pass these laws, there's actually something that a pattern of obstacle courses that have come up across America, and it's party agnostic. It's more determined by who's in power. And what I'm talking about is there are significant obstacle courses that disincentivize community members and junior legislators from accessing the legislative process. And things like, not only is there a filing deadline in states, there's a pre-filing deadline, and there's also an intention to file deadline. So basically like voter suppression, and we call it democracy suppression. So what we're doing is we're recording everything we're seeing, And we're also recording how we got through it in a playbook. And that playbook is something that we plan to open source because, there's a market for democracy right now. It's lobbying, paid lobbying. And what that means is if democracy is for the highest bidder, is a democracy after all. So we are trying to get rid of that and bring it directly to the people. So the Elevate Prize is helping us do that. I couldn't be more thrilled.
That's wonderful to hear. And to close off today, what is your hope for RISE in the coming years? And how can Googlers or anyone who has a chance to listen to this talk or podcast later be a part of that magic?
There are two things I want to say. One of our board members, Miriam Jolson, was part of Google, and she spoke openly as a survivor. And so, to any survivors that are at Google, I believe you. And there's a community that is for you. She left an incredible legacy at Google, I think, in talking openly about it. And I know that Google is so supportive of her. So I just want to address that up front. The second thing I want to say is, I saw so many of my peers have brilliant ideas about policy change. And so many of them didn't go into activism, policy change, because they felt like their innovation would not be rewarded in this industry. And it's true to a certain extent. Policy making agencies and nonprofits can be, a little behind the curve in terms of its flexibility, in terms of rewarding risk taking. And that's what this accelerator is meant to do. It's meant to give you a safe environment to incubate and accelerate your idea and reward that innovation, because we need that talent, we need those skills. And it's also meant to be something that is taking into account your career and life. Some people may do it full time, but some people have other jobs. And what we want to do is encourage you to be able to not only, pursue your own career, but also you don't have to give up that in order to change your community, in order to write a law. You can do both. I've done both. I actually ran RISE and started it while being holding a full-time job. And so, I would love for everyone to check us out. And if you have an idea, please apply. You're exactly the type of people we're looking for.
Well, Amanda, you certainly are the perfect example of a multifaceted person, multitudes, endless possibilities. It's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you. At this point, we're going to open for Q&A. So please feel free to ask any questions in the comment section. I believe we have some right now. The first one that I'll do is from Gracie Zhang. She would love to hear about the obstacles you faced to get RISE from its beginning of a seed of thought to where it is now, pushback from personal friends, family, professional organizations, etc. I know you've touched on some of this, so I don't know if you have any additional thoughts to plug in.
Yeah, it's so scary to take that jump. It's a leap of faith. And what really drove me is this burning fire, but also knowing that history was on my side, having a very, very deep, grounded belief in the principles that I was fighting for. And so with that clarity, it really helped me get, perspective on how people were reacting to it. When I started, there were people who were supportive, but also people who, again, questioned and said, that's not a good idea. But look, every single person who's ever trailblazed literally had this. So, it's probably a sign that you're doing something that the world needs.
Thank you. Next question is Sneha Rampal. Thank you so much for sharing your story. The work you've done is incredible. How do you suggest individuals get involved, whether it be through policy, volunteer work, tech solutions, etc.?
Yeah, is that specifically for, I'll answer specifically for RISE. So we actually have three different programs. The first one is RISE Justice Lab. So the first thing there is please apply. If you have an idea about a policy, about a law that you want to write, risenow.us/apply. And for those who, just want to learn about it, we actually are opening up all of our lectures. So in this 12-week program, every Monday there's going to be a lecture that's going to be open. So that's not only me talking about how we've passed laws, but also members of Congress, other lecturers from Harvard, from Stanford, who do this full time as an academic and research, and that's called School of Hope. So that will be public. But in terms of volunteering, please feel free to shoot me an email. We're always looking for volunteers. Team America is our second program. We call it affectionately Team America, but it's passing the Sexual Assault Survivor Bill of Rights in all 50 states. Unfortunately, because rape cases are adjudicated in mainly state courts, we still have to pass it state by state, even if there's a federal law. And we are always looking for people who want to pass this in their own community. You don't necessarily have to be physically in that place. You have a relationship. You grew up, say in Wisconsin, right? But you're in San Francisco now, right? We would still love for you to organize in Wisconsin, especially because everything is virtual now. And virtual organizing, progress still marches on. Please feel free to email me. And lastly, we have our United Nations campaign. So that's a worldwide Survivor Bill of Rights. And we are fighting for, these rights are the most basic of rights. In several countries, if you become pregnant as a result of your rape, you're forced out of the education system. So one of the rights is the right to have an education still. And we have been fighting for this at the United Nations. It takes the form of a General Assembly resolution, that's a technical term. For the past 4 years, we're always looking for people who are interested. And we're made up of civil society leaders from around the world. So yeah, please feel free to just email me if there's a way for me to share that. Also just check out our website or DM us, but many ways, both technically and policy-wise. I mean, the reason why we've been successful is because people came not only from a diverse set of social economic backgrounds, but also professional backgrounds, so everyone can be a part of helping move these issues forward.
Thank you so much for sharing those opportunities. I definitely have seen, I think on Instagram, you speaking at the United Nations and the amazing work that takes, that goes into creating those sorts of events. One question that we have coming up, 2 questions from Mina Gerby. Did you ever have any major setbacks that caused you to almost quit? And how did you overcome those challenges and stay committed? And then as a follow-up, she also wanted to know, how do you stay committed to one project when you have multiple ideas?
Yeah. Oh man, I can think of them now and I can feel them now in my soul. Yeah, of course we had setbacks. And those setbacks, the ones that hurt the most were the people who were supposed to be in your corner. So I'm talking about senators, people who straight up told me, I'm sympathetic to your issue, but this is not going to help me win re-election. And I was like, oh, okay, wow, brutal honesty, at least you're honest. But yeah, there's a certain amount of pathological optimism that I certainly had in going into this work, but still have, to be honest, because it is a belief in democracy, an inherent belief in the fabric of this nation and experiment that ultimately, if we put in the work and convince one another, at least every single politician who ran for office and said that they believed in that spirit needs to be held accountable to what it is that they said. And I've seen it work 32 times, and so despite the setbacks, which have been painful, and those setbacks usually have been, political champions who I realized, oh, you're just trying to use this for your campaign, or you're just trying to use this as political pawns, which is why most bills don't pass. We've seen it come through. So I still believe, and it honestly, it kind of relates to the second follow-up question, which is a grind. There's a very fashionable kind of activism, if I may, which is activism of the day. And you are excited about one issue, you're going to talk about it, you're going to go to a protest or march, and then that's it. And that's fine, and that's needed. What we do is, there's a difference between activism and organizing. Activism is straight voltage, and organizing is directed energy. And what we do is both. And that directed energy part, that's consistent. That's every day. So change takes time. Incremental change, builds upon itself. And being able to wake up every day and do it is something that's really helpful.
I love that. That example of directed energy being activism and that straight voltage being organizing. I think it does help to, put some distinctions between all the different ways that people can participate in movements. And I think, we have time for a few more questions. And the next one comes from Akshay Kumar. How do you convince legislators to view these activist projects as nonpartisan or bipartisan, especially for topics where the bulk of activist effort comes from one political party?
That's a great question. That's something that we dealt with when we first approached Congress. Well, in every single issue, because we are pegged as, sexual assault, which is mainly something that is progressive. I'll just tell you what we've done, which has really worked, and that's practicing radical empathy. That sounds really hard, and it's not for everyone. Let me say that up front. It's not for everyone. It is brutal. It's difficult. What we do is we climb over these empathy walls and we sit in a very uncomfortable space with people who have had a history of saying things that may have hurt us, of saying things that we outright disagree with, saying things that don't see the humanity in us. What we do is even though we know this, see the humanity in them. And we approach that, we put our foot first and say, hey, look, we really disagree on a lot of things, but that's not what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about today is to listen to you. If you think about an argument, maybe with your partner, your sister, brother, whatever, a close relationship, if you get into arguments, the person might be really defensive. That's the first thing that they're going to go with first. And if you're able to diffuse that and say, hey, I'm not here to win an argument. Well, you are, but I'm not here to win an argument. I'm here your side. It'll be a lot more helpful. And another way to look at this, which is a part of what we train our organizers, is to have a diplomacy, a national security lens to it. So think about it. If you are negotiating on nuclear disarmament, right? With a dictator, yeah, maybe that dictator has terrible things, but for that moment, for the hour that you have with that dictator, you're going to be just focused on nuclear disarmament. That's what they've agreed to come to talk about. That's what you've agreed to talk about. You're going to move that needle forward. And that's been really helpful to do that. The other thing is bringing their own constituent and tying it to their incentives, and those incentives are usually re-election. So both of those techniques have been very helpful.
Amanda, I've got to say, a lot of the strategies that you've recommended, agenda setting, talking about negotiations, et cetera, a lot of these are very applicable to my sales job at Google. If at any point beyond space you would like to come join sales, that could be an interesting next career. I have to say, a lot of the times the best practices that we recommend are all things that I hear you speaking about today when you talk about your organization, how you approach conversations. Got to say, cream of the crop strategies. I think our last question of the day, unless there's, in the next 3 or 4 minutes, I think we're going to wrap up. But this will come from Emma Chase, and her question is, what would you say is one of the benefits of quote unquote trendy optical activism?
Well, visibility is certainly it. It's people getting more engaged. And I think it is needed. It certainly is needed, and it absolutely makes a difference. It's, of course, about not only, the flavor of the day, but also the continued engagement in these issues that will ultimately result in building a strong foundation. So, both are needed. And it's really interesting to try to tap not only into the technical, legislative process, but also the cultural aspect, which follows, trends, or sets trends rather. Is it culture that shapes laws, or is it laws that shapes cultures? It's both. They're threads in a fabric.
Well, thank you so much, Amanda, for being with us today. It's been an inspiration to hear your journey and to also be able to share it with others who will be listening to this today and also beyond. Any last words before we part? Hopes for 2021?
Well, I just want to say, I know that people might be feeling anxious and scared right now, and I know what it's like to feel that. I just want to let you know that the most powerful tool we all have is our voice, and that no one is powerless when we come together. No one is invisible when we demand to be seen. So demand to be seen. And thank you so much for listening in today. We really, really hope that you'll apply, and we look forward to listening to your ideas.
Thank you so much, Amanda. We'll be signing off Talks at Google, and if you want to learn more about Amanda, please look at her work with RISE, and feel free to apply to the RISE Justice Labs if you have an idea that you want to turn into application.